They thought he was just another old man running a greasy garage on the edge of town. But when Officer Carter stepped into that shop, he didn't know the hands wiping engine oil from that Camry had once carried a rifle through the jungles of Southeast Asia. And what he really didn't know was who that man's son was. It was a quiet Tuesday morning in the sleepy town of Brookhaven, Mississippi. The sun poured golden light through the half-open bay doors of a worn but well-kept garage on Magnolia Avenue. Inside, Walt Bishop, 72 years old, worked with a quiet kind of intensity that only comes from decades of doing the same thing and doing it right. He wiped his hands on a red shop rag, leaning over the engine of a 2015 Toyota Camry. The water pump was failing. Walt could hear it. Feel it. After 43 years of wrenching, he didn't need fancy scanners. The rattle, the rhythm, it told him everything. Walt's shop, Bishop Auto and Diesel, had stood on that cracked concrete corner since 1979. He bought it when he got back from Vietnam, after leaving a piece of his leg and a lot of his soul in a humid rice paddy 8,000 miles away. He'd built this place from nothing. The rusting metal sign above the entrance, the mismatched waiting chairs inside, even the creaky old radio always tuned to blues, every piece of it was his. Behind his workbench, an entire wall of photographs told a silent story, Walt as a young soldier, flanked by his platoon in camouflage. His late wife Janine, holding their newborn son, Logan. Photos of Logan's Little League games, his high school graduation, and most importantly his commissioning as an officer in the United States Army. 2 Purple Hearts and a Bronze Star were framed in the center, unmoving reminders of sacrifice and grit. Then, the bell over the front door chimed. Walt didn't look up immediately. He was halfway through loosening a stubborn bolt, the kind that talks back if you disrespect it. "Be right with you," he called out, voice gravel thick. But something about the reply stopped him cold. "Take your time, old man. We're not in any hurry." That voice. That sneering, smug tone. Walt knew it. Every small town has a few of them, the boys with badges who wear power like its armor. In Brookhaven, that name was Officer Daniel Carter. Walt set his wrench down gently and turned. 3 men in uniform stood inside his garage. Officer Carter, tall and blond with ice-pale eyes, stood front and center. On either side, Officers Reed and Hawkins, both wearing the stiff, forced faces of men who'd rather be anywhere else. Walt felt the weight of it instantly. This wasn't about a traffic ticket. It wasn't about policing. It was a message. "Morning, gentlemen," Walt said, voice calm. "What can I do for you?" Carter smirked, running a gloved finger along the hood of the Camry like he owned it. "Nice setup you've got here, Bishop. Been here what, 40 years? 43, Walt answered, not moving. 43, Carter whistled, nodding as he slowly walked around the car. "That's a long time to be in business. Must mean you're doing something right." Walt said nothing. He'd seen this dance before. The slow circle, the condescending praise, it was intimidation 101. "I do honest work for honest pay," he said, tone steady. "Always have." Carter leaned on the car's fender now. "That's the thing, Walt. Times are changing. Costs are going up. Insurance. Inspections. Small businesses like this," he gestured vaguely, "they're struggling to keep up." The implication was clear as oil on a driveway. Walt had heard the rumors. Businesses, especially black-owned ones, being approached by officers talking about community support. Those who didn't pay found themselves drowning in fines, inspections, or worse. "I'm doing just fine," Walt replied. "Everything's up to date. My paperwork's clean." Officer Reed stepped forward. "We're just making sure local businesses feel supported." Walt almost laughed. Support? He'd fought in a jungle where support meant dragging a bleeding buddy through mortar fire. He thought of Logan, now stationed somewhere God probably couldn't even spell, doing things Walt didn't ask about. This wasn't his son's fight. It was his. I've fought real enemies before, Walt said quietly, eyes fixed on Carter. You boys? You're just bullies with badges. The air turned colder. Carter's smile dropped like a mask slipping. His hand rested near his holstered sidearm, and he took a step forward. Careful, Walt. Disrespecting an officer could be seen as disturbing the peace. But Walt didn't back down. Not an inch. I served this country. Earned 2 Purple Hearts. A Bronze Star. I know my rights. And I know why you're really here. Reed shifted his feet nervously. But Carter just chuckled. $500 a month, he said flatly. Call it a community initiative. Keeps things safe. Walt clenched his jaw. No. Carter raised an eyebrow. Think about it, old man. Cars are complicated. Fires start. Windows break. Would be a shame if something happened and no one was around to respond. The threat lingered like smoke. Walt thought of his customers. The families. The single moms who trusted him. The high school kids saving up for their first car. He thought of Janine. Of his father. Of every man he'd carried on his back when bullets were flying. Get out of my shop, he said finally. Unless you've got a real reason to be here, we're done. Carter stepped in close, trying to use his height as a weapon. But Walt met his eyes without flinching. Big mistake, Bishop, Carter growled. The only mistake, Walt replied, was thinking you could scare me. They locked eyes. War veteran versus wannabe warlord. For a moment, the air in the garage was heavy with the weight of unspoken violence. Finally, Carter turned. Let's go, he barked to his men. Mr. Bishop needs some time to reconsider his position. But as he reached the doorway, he paused. Remember what I said about fires, he said over his shoulder. They start easy in places like this. The door slammed. Walt didn't move until he saw their patrol car roll away. Then, slowly, he let out a breath. His fingers trembled not from fear, but from the sheer fury coursing through him. He knew it wasn't over. Men like Carter didn't take no for an answer. But neither did Walt Bishop. And the next move wasn't going to be his. Thousands of miles away, deep in the shadows of a war zone, Colonel Logan Bishop led a Black Ops team with surgical precision. But one phone call shattered the mission and changed everything. Because when a decorated soldier finds out his father's been arrested by dirty cops, the war doesn't stay overseas. It comes home. Somewhere in the Middle East, in an undisclosed forward operating base hidden beneath layers of camouflage netting and reinforced concrete, Colonel Logan Bishop stood in complete silence. The operations room was dim, lit only by the glow of surveillance monitors and the pulsing red dots on a tactical map. Logan's gaze was steady, fixed on a screen showing thermal scans of a compound surrounded by desert. His Delta Force unit had tracked a high-value target for 3 months, an international arms dealer linked to bombings across 3 continents. Everything was going according to plan. Until a call came through on the encrypted line. Priority Alpha, said Lieutenant Sarah King, his second-in-command. She didn't need to say more. That designation was only used for one thing: family. Without a word, Logan stepped away from the command table. His call receiver was already buzzing in his hand. He accepted. The voice on the other end was unmistakable. Walter Bishop, calm as ever, but there was a tightness beneath it. Son. I need your help. Logan's blood froze. His father wasn't the kind of man who asked for help. This was a man who had dragged wounded Marines out of a jungle under mortar fire. Who built a business with his bare hands. Who raised a son to never fear bullies in any uniform. What happened? Logan asked, voice steady, but low. Walter explained methodically, like he was giving a situation report. About Officer Carter's visit. About the threat. About the refusal. And finally, about being arrested under false charges that morning. Logan didn't speak for several seconds. His heart didn't beat faster, it slowed. The way it always did before a storm. He didn't ask for proof. He didn't need it. He knew what kind of man his father was. And he also knew what kind of men wore uniforms like Carter's to hide the fact they were nothing more than predators. "I'll handle it," Logan said quietly. "Hang tight." "And, Dad?" "Yeah. You were right about bullies in uniform." The line clicked off. Lieutenant King was waiting for him when he returned to the command station. She didn't ask. She just looked at him and saw the shift in his face. The transformation. Not the Delta Force commander. Not the ghost they all feared. This was personal. "Sir?" she asked, stepping forward. "You're in command. Wrap the op clean extraction. No casualties." "You're leaving?" she asked, startled. "What happened?" "They laid hands on my father," Logan said, his tone like ice cracking on concrete. "In my town. In my country." The room went still. Everyone knew Colonel Bishop's backstory. The humble beginnings. The military career full of black ink missions and classified kills. But most of all, they knew what happened when someone crossed the invisible line with him. No one said a word as Logan gathered only what he needed: a lightweight go bag, a secure sat phone, and a rugged tablet encrypted with command-level clearance. Then he paused. "Sergeant Vega," he called. A veteran comm specialist looked up from the console. "Yes, sir. I need full files on the Brookhaven Police Department. Every officer. Every asset. Every dime that's moved in the last 6 months." Vega blinked. "We don't have jurisdiction there." "I'm not asking for jurisdiction," Logan said. "I'm asking for information." "Yes, sir." "On it." As he boarded the military transport waiting on the strip, the plane barely warmed up before it launched into the sky. Logan reviewed what Vega had already uncovered: financial irregularities, complaints swept under the rug, business owners filing anonymous reports that vanished. Carter wasn't just a dirty cop. He was part of something bigger. Something systemic. A network, and it had chosen the wrong old man to pressure. At 34,000 feet, Logan received a secure message. Mayor's office implicated. Syndicate ties suspected. Officer Carter is front-facing, but not the root. Chief of police likely involved. Names redacted in city records. Possible state-level protection. Logan smiled grimly. "Good," he muttered. "The higher they are, the harder they fall." As the jet neared U.S. airspace, his secure line buzzed again. "Lieutenant King. Mission complete, Colonel. Target secured. No casualties. Just how you trained us. Appreciate the update. Need us to deploy stateside?" Logan considered it. But then shook his head. "No. This one's mine." "Roger that, Ghost," she replied. "Just try not to start a war in your hometown." He didn't laugh. "I don't start wars. I end them." Back in Brookhaven, Officer Daniel Carter sipped coffee in the break room of the local station. His boots on the table, his tone smug. "Old man's in holding," he told Officer Hawkins. "He'll come around. They all do." That's when rookie Officer Mason walked in, visibly nervous. "Sir, you might want to see this." Carter frowned. "What is it?" "It's about Walter Bishop's son." Carter rolled his eyes. "Let me guess. A lawyer?" Mason shook his head. "No, sir. Colonel Logan Bishop. Delta Force. Command rank. Codename Ghost. Most of his files classified, but what we can access, it's sir, he's not just military. He's the kind of guy other special ops tell ghost stories about. Carter laughed, but there was an edge to it now. Come on, Mason. He's just one man. Sir, the FBI just requested our body cam footage from the arrest. DOJ sent a letter of inquiry. Internal Affairs called twice this morning. Someone flipped a switch. Now Carter put down his cup. For the first time since he pinned on a badge, he felt real fear crawl up the back of his neck. And across town, in a quiet holding cell, Walter Bishop leaned back against the wall. He'd made the call. He'd done what needed to be done. Now, he just waited. Because he knew his son. He knew what came next. Officer Daniel Carter had made a career out of fear. He silenced complaints, padded his pockets, and ruled Brookhaven like it was his own private empire. But he made one mistake: he pushed the wrong man. Now, the man they call the Ghost is back home. And this time, the predator has become the prey. The air in the Brookhaven Police Department had shifted. No one said it out loud, but the tension was thick like smoke before a fire. Officers who once strutted with arrogance now glanced over their shoulders. Phones were ringing more than usual. Department servers were running slow. And Daniel Carter was starting to feel like someone was watching him. Because someone was. Colonel Logan Bishop didn't make a dramatic entrance. He arrived in civilian clothes, boots laced tight, sleeves rolled, eyes hidden behind dark sunglasses. No sirens. No headlines. Just quiet footsteps and calm strategy. He didn't need backup. He was the backup. First, he walked the perimeter of his father's shop. Walter had been released from holding on a technicality, processing error, they said, but everyone knew it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Logan noticed the security cameras had been smashed. Windows were still boarded up. His father had started cleaning the place, but the message had been sent. Fear. They were trying to scare him. Big mistake. Inside the garage, Logan sat across from his father, who poured 2 cups of black coffee like it was any other morning. They'll be watching, Walter said simply, sipping. Good, Logan replied. Let them. I want them to know I'm here. Walter didn't ask what Logan was going to do. He just nodded once, quietly proud and quietly worried. Later that afternoon, Officer Carter sat in his squad car outside City Hall, legs up on the dash, watching people move in and out of the building. That's when he saw it. A sleek black SUV, government plates, parked silently at the curb. A woman in a gray suit stepped out. Special Agent Dana Whitley, FBI. She didn't say a word to Carter as she entered the building. But she glanced in his direction. Just a flicker. Carter's jaw clenched. 2 hours later, another agency showed up, this time DOJ. And by sunset, someone from Internal Affairs had entered the department's back door, clipboard in hand. The rats were circling. But Carter wasn't ready to give up his throne just yet. That night, he made a call. To a number he only used when things got really bad. Yeah, came the gruff voice on the other end. We've got a situation. That Bishop kid? He's not a lawyer. He's Delta Force. Code name Ghost. There was a pause. Then, if that's true, you've got bigger problems than a court hearing. You need to disappear. Tonight. Come on, Carter scoffed. He's just. Don't finish that sentence, the voice snapped. I've seen what this man does. He doesn't leave loose ends. If he's there, it's already over. Get out while you still can. The line went dead. Carter stared at the phone. For the first time in his career, he felt the icy grip of something unfamiliar. Not guilt. Fear. Meanwhile, Logan was moving. Quietly. Efficiently. Lethally. His first stop. Brookhaven Records office. A friendly clerk who had once served under Walter in the local VFW let Logan inside after hours. 10 minutes later, Logan had copies of every inspection order, police complaint, and departmental memo involving his father's shop from the past 5 years. They all led to one name, Carter. And not just Carter. The police chief. The mayor. The entire upper tier of Brookhaven's Good Ol' Boys network. It was a web. And Logan had just found the center. Back at the precinct, Rookie Officer Mason was at his desk, watching everything unfold. He had joined the force believing in honor and duty. But what he saw behind the curtain made him sick. Protection fees. Evidence tampering. Even off-the-books arrests. But it wasn't until he saw the photo on his desk, his younger sister standing next to a broken-down car outside Bishop Auto Repair, that he made his decision. He reached into his bag, pulled out an encrypted flash drive, and started copying everything he could. Body cam footage, emails, financial records that if they found out, he'd be finished, but if he didn't act, they'd win. Across town, Logan met with a local journalist, Tanya Rhodes, editor of the Brookhaven Chronicle. She had tried for years to expose what was happening but got shut down every time. Until now, Logan slid a thick manila envelope across her desk, photos. Logs. Payment records. Proof. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Is this real? Every word, Logan said. And there's more coming. Get ready. Meanwhile, Officer Carter received a package.no return address, inside, a playing card. The ace of spades. And a note, you're not the hunter anymore. You're the prey. He staggered back from his desk, eyes scanning the room. No one seemed to notice. No one should have known where he lived. But someone did. And across town, Walter watched from his shop window as an unmarked car circled the block. Again. He didn't move. He just kept working, like he had for 43 years, but he knew what was coming. They'd push harder now. Dirtier, and when they did, his son would be waiting. The sun rose over Brookhaven with a deceptive calm, but beneath the surface, the town was coming undone. Logan Bishop was already in motion, moving through the shadows like a man born to them. He wasn't here for revenge, he was here to dismantle a system that believed it was untouchable. Officer Carter didn't know it yet, but every move he made was now being watched, logged, and cross-referenced. Logan had activated his network. Former intelligence officers, military contacts, cyber analysts, each one owed him a favor, and each one delivered. Within hours, he had secured partial access to the police department's internal server, discovered at least 6 unexplained payments deposited into Carter's bank account, and linked them to known shell companies with ties to organized crime. But even more valuable than data was a human asset, someone inside. That person turned out to be Officer Mason. The young rookie had spent the night copying files onto an encrypted drive, hands trembling, heart pounding. He knew what would happen if he got caught. People like Carter didn't forgive betrayal. But Mason wasn't driven by fear, he was driven by the memory of his mother, a single parent who raised him to do what was right. And this? This was right. At exactly 3:12 p.m., he arrived at Bishop Auto Repair in plain clothes, glancing over his shoulder every few seconds before stepping through the door. Walter was working on a '98 Silverado when Mason entered. Logan was already seated in the office, eyes locked on the young man with quiet intensity. Mason didn't waste time. He pulled the encrypted drive from his jacket and placed it on the table. Everything I could get, he said, voice tight. Emails, video files, financial transfers. Even Carter's internal memos. You'll find they've been running this racket for over 5 years. Logan didn't blink. Why are you helping us? Mason hesitated, then spoke quietly. Because this isn't what I signed up for. I became a cop to protect people, not to shake them down. Logan nodded once. No praise. Just a signal of acknowledgement. He handed Mason a small secure phone. You're our inside man now. Don't contact me unless it's an emergency. But when the time comes, you'll help bring this whole house of cards down. Mason straightened his spine. Yes, sir. When he left, Walter stepped into the office, wiping his hands on a rag. Can we trust him? Logan leaned back slightly. We'll find out. But my gut says yes. Outside, the town buzzed with normalcy, people pumping gas, grabbing groceries, kids riding bikes. They had no idea a war was unfolding beneath their feet. Meanwhile, across town, Officer Carter was unraveling. The FBI had requested additional files. DOJ investigators had returned, this time with federal warrants. Even Internal Affairs was sniffing around his personal laptop. But what made his blood run cold wasn't the agencies. It was the silence. He hadn't seen Logan Bishop in days, hadn't heard anything, hadn't been followed, at least not that he could tell. That was worse. Because it meant Logan was waiting. Planning. And people like Carter knew how predators operated. When it was quiet, that's when you had to be scared. In a last-ditch effort to regain control, Carter visited the office of Police Chief Miles Hardin, a man with gray hair, a cigar addiction, and decades of compromise behind his badge. He's tightening the net, Carter said, pacing. We need to hit back, scare the old man again. Make him disappear if we have to. The chief rubbed his temples, exhaling smoke. Are you insane? His son is Delta Force. If we push again, we won't scare them, we'll escalate this into something we can't control. Carter slammed his palm on the desk. We're already past that. If we don't act now, we're going to prison. Chief Hardin didn't respond right away. But the flicker of panic in his eyes betrayed him. They both knew it was too late. The dam had cracked. And while they scrambled to cover their tracks, Logan was building his next move. He delivered the contents of Mason's drive directly to journalist Tanya Rhodes under the cover of darkness. They met in a parking garage 2 blocks from the courthouse. Everything's verified, he told her. This is the tip of the iceberg. Get it in the press. Don't wait for the story to be sanitized. Tanya opened the files and gasped. Surveillance footage of police officers planting evidence. Audio recordings of Carter threatening store owners. Emails discussing kickbacks and fake inspection citations. This could bury them all, she whispered. That's the plan, Logan replied, turning away. Back at the police department, the panic was now spreading like a virus. Officers were whispering in the halls, deleting files, calling lawyers. Someone had found a printed copy of the Ace of Spades tacked to the bulletin board in the locker room. Beneath it, one sentence, typed in bold. You know what you did. Chief Hardin held an emergency meeting. Start cleaning house, he ordered. Shred everything. Every file. Every photo. Digital and paper. If there's a trace, burn it. The office turned into a crime scene. Paper shredders roared. Hard drives disappeared. Carter oversaw it all, sweating through his uniform. But none of them realized it was already too late. Because while they were destroying evidence, Logan had already replicated everything stored in secure off-site servers, backed up to federal partners, and prepped for public release. The trap had already closed. All that remained was the snap. And just before dawn, it happened. Tanya's story hit the front page of every local media outlet. Brookhaven's dirty secret, protection rackets, corrupt cops, and one man who fought back. Within hours, it was picked up nationally. Interviews flooded in. The DOJ announced an open investigation. The governor issued a statement. But Logan Bishop didn't stop to celebrate. He was already working on the next step. Because now that the public knew they couldn't be silenced, the real war had just begun. And the men who once thought themselves untouchable? They were running out of time. The story had gone viral. National networks picked it up before sunrise, and by mid-morning, every screen in Brookhaven was flashing the same headline: Federal investigation launched into Brookhaven police corruption. But while the town buzzed with shock and outrage, a darker meeting was already underway behind closed doors. In a private backroom of a country club outside town, Police Chief Miles Hardin, Officer Daniel Carter, and Mayor Brent Wycliffe sat around a table with trembling hands and white knuckles. The mayor, normally composed and camera-ready, looked like a man aged by a decade overnight. "The DOJ is watching us," he said flatly. "The feds are already combing our financials. And if the Chronicle's reporting is even half true, they'll come down on us like a wrecking ball." Chief Hardin exhaled through clenched teeth. "Then we stop the source before it spreads any further." Carter leaned forward. "You mean the Bishop kid?" "I mean the entire family," Hardin said. "They're not backing down. Not after this." The mayor hesitated, then pulled a business card from his wallet. "No name. Just a number. I hoped we'd never use this." Carter took it, memorizing the digits. One last resort. That night, the deal was made. A call was placed to a security contractor out of Eastern Europe, former special forces, now mercenaries for hire. The kind of men who didn't ask questions. They were given a name: Logan Bishop. A location: Bishop Auto Repair. And an objective: silence him. The operation was scheduled for midnight. Four men, trained and armed with suppressed weapons, arrived in Brookhaven by unmarked van and split into two-man teams. One approached from the rear alley, the other moved along the side wall beneath the cover of darkness. What they didn't know was that every inch of that garage had already been turned into a trap. Logan had seen this kind of move before in Kandahar, in Caracas, in a dozen black sites whose names would never be spoken aloud. He had anticipated it the moment Tanya's story went live. If this syndicate couldn't kill the truth, they would try to kill the messenger. Walter had wanted to stay, but Logan insisted he go. "This isn't your fight anymore, Dad." Walter had stared at him for a long moment before nodding. "Just make sure you finish it." And now, alone in the darkened garage, Logan waited. The shop lights had been cut. Only a single bulb remained glowing in the back office bait. The mercenaries moved with precision, sweeping the perimeter silently, scanning for motion sensors. They didn't see the hidden infrared cameras. They didn't hear the silent ping that activated when they crossed the threshold. They didn't know they had already been marked. Logan moved like smoke. No gun. No blade. Just darkness and instinct. He watched from the rafters as the first man breached the side door. As the second entered through the rear. They made their way toward the office. One reached for the light switch. But before his finger touched it, the bulb above exploded with a sharp crack and the shop went pitch black. The mercenaries froze. Their night vision flickered, then failed. A pulse jammer hidden beneath the floor had fried their optics. They were blind. And that's when Logan struck. The first man went down without a sound, yanked into the shadows by an iron grip that crushed his windpipe just long enough to put him under. The second spun toward the sound but caught a strike to the temple that left him crumpled beside the lift. The remaining two panicked, firing at shadows, their suppressors hissing. But Logan was already gone. A ghost in his domain. When the final operative turned toward the exit, he found Logan waiting. No words. Just a steel stare and a rapid series of blows that left the man unconscious, breathless, and zip-tied to the floor. 5 minutes. That's all it took. Logan stood over them, heart steady. He didn't kill them. That would have been too easy. He needed them alive. He needed them to send a message. Across town, Mayor Wycliffe paced nervously in his study when his phone rang. "Is it done?" he asked quickly. On the other end, a cold voice replied, "No. Your problem is still very much alive." The line went dead. Moments later, the mayor's laptop screen flickered. A message appeared in white letters on a black background: Strike 1. At sunrise, FBI agents were already on site at Bishop Auto Repair. Logan handed over the mercenaries, along with their weapons, encrypted radios, and GPS trackers. They were hired locally, he told Special Agent Dana Whitley. "I have recordings." The agent raised an eyebrow. "You bugged them?" "No," Logan replied. "I bugged the police department." Whitley stared at him for a beat, then said, "I hope you're ready for what happens next." Logan nodded. "I am. But they're not." Meanwhile, inside the Brookhaven PD, chaos reigned. Officers who had once smirked behind their badges now scrambled to hide anything that could tie them to the Bishop case. Some started calling in sick. Others cleaned out their desks. But Logan knew desperate men make reckless decisions. And he wasn't finished yet. Later that morning, Officer Mason entered the precinct and found Carter pacing by his desk. "We need to talk," Carter barked. "Where were you last night?" "Home," Mason said carefully. "Why?" Carter shoved a printed photo into his chest: surveillance stills of the mercenary van outside Bishop Auto Repair. "This isn't random. Someone's feeding him information." Mason kept his expression neutral. "You think it's me?" Carter leaned in. "If I find out it is, you won't walk out of this station." But Mason just nodded. "Understood." Then he walked to the locker room, heart racing, and sent a single message to Logan: "They're falling apart. They know someone's inside." That evening, Logan met with Tanya in the garage, walking her through the remnants of the attack. She recorded everything: broken equipment, the mercenaries' gear, the damage. "You think they'll try again?" she asked. "No," Logan said, staring into the fading light. "Next time, they won't send muscle. They'll try something worse." Tanya hesitated. "Like what?" Logan's jaw tightened. "Desperation makes powerful men stupid. They'll burn the town down if it means burying the truth." Outside, down the block, another unmarked car rolled past the shop slowly. Logan watched it disappear around the corner. He knew the game wasn't over. It had only just begun. The morning after the failed assassination attempt, Brookhaven woke to a different reality. Headlines screamed of mercenaries captured on American soil, of local officials under investigation, and of the mysterious Delta Force operative known only as the Ghost. But while the town buzzed with fear and speculation, inside the Brookhaven Police Department, the atmosphere was pure panic. The evidence room, once the silent heart of the department's corruption, had become a battlefield. Chief Hardin barked orders like a man trying to bail water from a sinking ship. "Wipe the drives. Burn the backups. Get rid of the old files now," he growled. Officers who once stood tall now whispered nervously, their faces pale, their hands shaky. Some deleted records. Others shredded documents. But it was too late. Because Logan had already planned for this. Every move they made, every key pressed, every drawer emptied was being watched. Tapped security cams. Remote access tools. A hidden sting operation run by Logan's contact inside the DOJ had gone live hours ago. And the moment Chief Hardin's voice rose in that evidence room, his words were recorded. Miles away, in a federal field office, agents watched live footage with narrowed eyes. "They're scrambling," Agent Dana Whitley said. "This is it. The net is closing." Meanwhile, Officer Mason sat quietly at his desk, eyes fixed on his monitor but ears tuned to the chaos around him. His phone buzzed once, a secure message from Logan. Move now. Without hesitating, Mason slipped the final flash drive into his pocket and left the station through the side exit. 20 minutes later, he met Logan behind a hardware store off Route 12. Logan didn't waste time. What did you get? Mason handed him the drive. Full records on the mayor's offshore accounts. Emails linking Chief Hardin to a shell corporation in Louisiana. And audio of Carter discussing cleaning up loose ends. Logan nodded once. You've done enough. You're out now. Mason blinked. What? You're compromised, Logan said. If they figure it out, you'll be dead before backup arrives. Mason swallowed hard. Then let me stay useful. If I leave now, they'll know I flipped. If I stay, I can keep feeding you. Logan studied him. A second too long. Then finally nodded. Fine. But from now on, you only speak to me through encrypted lines. And if it gets hot, you disappear. Mason nodded. Understood. Back at City Hall, Mayor Brent Wycliffe sat alone in his office, watching news coverage of his own scandal unfold in real time. His phone buzzed. It was a number he hadn't dialed in years. When he answered, a voice he once feared more than death spoke calmly. You've failed. It was Marcus Delacroix, regional boss of the syndicate that truly ran Brookhaven from the shadows. Your department is compromised. Your police chief is a liability. And that boy Logan Bishop, he's burning everything. Wycliffe tried to compose himself. We can contain this. I just need time. Delacroix laughed, cold and hollow. There is no time. The syndicate is pulling out. Effective immediately. You're on your own. Then the line went dead. Wycliffe sat in silence for a long time. Then he opened his desk drawer and pulled out a pistol. He stared at it. Considered it. Then put it away. Not yet. Across town, Logan coordinated the next wave. He didn't just want arrests, he wanted exposure. Real, permanent damage. So he made the decision. He uploaded a curated portion of the files, just enough to set off alarm bells at every major federal agency. The FBI. The DOJ. Homeland Security. The IRS. All of them received digital packages. Photos. Spreadsheets. Audio recordings. Surveillance footage. It wasn't just about Brookhaven anymore. It was about everything Brookhaven touched. Surrounding counties. State senators. Judges. A regional spider web of dirty money, intimidation, and silence. And now, it was lit up like a Christmas tree. That night, the first raids began. Federal agents stormed the homes of several Brookhaven officers. At least 2 were found trying to flee with duffel bags full of cash. Others lawyered up instantly. By morning, 8 officers were in custody. More would follow. At the police department, Chief Hardin locked himself in his office and refused to come out. Carter wasn't so lucky. He arrived at work to find a single playing card on his desk, another ace of spades. But this one had a new message written in fine, deliberate handwriting: checkmate. His hands shook. He reached for his gun, but it wasn't there. Then his phone buzzed. A private message. A photo. His daughter, at her college dorm, walking to class. Nothing threatening. Just, watched. Carefully. Precisely. Carter dropped his phone. Logan was watching it all from a quiet room at the VFW, surrounded by encrypted laptops and a rolling board of names, photos, and evidence lines. Tanya Rhodes stood nearby, still in disbelief. You built this whole operation in a week, she said. Logan looked up. No. It took them 5 years to build the corruption. I just showed up with the match. He turned back to his laptop as the screen lit up with an urgent ping. They're moving, he said. The mayor's meeting with the last of the cartel enforcers. Probably planning a last-ditch attempt to shut us down. Maybe worse. Tanya swallowed. You think they'll go violent again? They're desperate, Logan replied. And desperation makes cowards dangerous. An hour later, Logan intercepted audio of Wycliffe calling in a private strike team different from the last one. This group wasn't subtle. Ex-military, heavily armed, and not hired for intimidation. Hired for elimination. Targets, Logan Bishop. Walter Bishop. And possibly Tanya Rhodes. The mayor had gone full scorched earth. But Logan wasn't running. Instead, he prepared the battlefield. He rerouted the garage's security grid into a defense matrix he'd used in a counterinsurgency op, reinforced doors. Panic rooms. Remote-triggered power kills. And he called in one last favor from Captain Rena Vale, a former Delta operator who owed him her life. She was already en route with a federal tactical team and a warrant stack as thick as a phone book. That night, Logan stood outside his father's shop, watching the stars. Walter joined him, silent for a moment. You think this ends tonight? Logan nodded slowly. No. But it ends here. We draw the line. We hold it. Walter glanced at the dark streets, then back at his son. And after this? Logan exhaled. There's always another fire to put out. But this town sleeps in peace first. As midnight neared, unmarked SUVs began to crawl through the streets of Brookhaven again, but this time, the hunters were being hunted. And when the mayor made his last play, he found himself alone. No protection.no syndicate.no backup. Just the cold stare of a soldier trained to end wars before they begin. The courthouse in downtown Brookhaven had never seen this many cameras. National news vans lined the street like vultures, their satellite dishes reaching toward the sky. Crowds formed on the steps. Protesters. Supporters. Spectators who had followed the story of a father and son who'd stood up against the system. Inside, everything was different. The walls were clean. The seal of justice above the bench shone under the lights. But the air carried weight, the weight of consequence. This wasn't just a trial. It was a reckoning. Walter Bishop stood tall, dressed in his military blues, ribbons polished, the bronze star glinting beneath the courtroom lights. Time had etched lines on his face, but none dulled his presence. He was the first witness. The man who had started it all, not by force, but by simply saying no. Logan sat beside him, not in uniform, but still unmistakable in demeanor. The room quieted when they entered. Even the defendants looked away. 3 rows were filled with former power brokers. Officer Daniel Carter. Chief Miles Hardin. Mayor Brent Wycliffe. Even Marcus Delacroix, the syndicate's regional enforcer, now stripped of protection, sat cuffed and silent. There were nearly 24 others, bankers, clerks, inspectors, officers. All part of the system that fed off Brookhaven for years. But today, the system had to answer. Judge Marlene Givens, a Federal Circuit Court veteran with a reputation for zero tolerance, entered and took her seat. Be seated, she said firmly. This court is now in session. The prosecutor, Assistant U.S. Attorney Claire Mendoza, stood and delivered the opening. What this court is about to hear is not merely a case of local corruption. It is a blueprint for how good people are bullied into silence. How systems become weapons. But it is also the story of resistance and of justice finding a way back. Walter was called first. He walked to the stand without hesitation. Sworn in, seated, and steady. Please describe, Mendoza began, what happened on the day Officer Carter came into your shop. Walter's voice was clear. He came in with 2 other officers. They didn't want repairs. They wanted payments. $500 a month. For community protection. He recounted every moment. The threats. The vandalism. The arrest. The threats to his livelihood and to his life. Mendoza nodded. And why did you refuse? Walter looked straight at the jury. Because I've seen real enemies. Men who believed in something, even if it was wrong. These boys didn't believe in anything. They were just predators. And I don't kneel to predators. The room held its breath. The defense objected. Judge Givens overruled. The jury scribbled notes furiously. Next came Officer Mason, who revealed everything he had witnessed on the inside. He described fake citations, planted evidence, bribes in parking lots, business owners who were pushed out if they resisted. When Mendoza asked why he chose to break the silence, Mason's answer was simple. Because I joined this department to protect people. Not to be a gangster with a badge. Then came the surprise witness, Daniel Carter. Shackled, hollow-eyed, and stripped of all arrogance, he took the stand as part of a plea deal. I thought I was untouchable, he admitted. We had the mayor. The chief. The money flowed. We thought no one would stand up. But Bishop did. And once he did, it all cracked open. He named names. Detailed bank transactions. Read emails out loud in court that described intimidation strategies, backdoor payments, and the decision to make an example of the old man. When Mendoza asked why he was cooperating now, Carter didn't try to spin it. Because I've got a daughter. And I'd rather she remember me telling the truth than dying a coward. Over the course of the next week, witness after witness came forward. Some voluntarily. Others reluctantly. Tanya Rhodes testified about years of suppressed stories. Evidence that disappeared. Editors who were bought off. This town used to be afraid to speak, she told the court. Now, because of one man's refusal to be bullied, we've found our voice again. The evidence was overwhelming. Emails. Surveillance footage. Body cam recordings. Money trails that led to offshore accounts and fake charities. When the defense tried to discredit Logan Bishop, they quickly discovered it was a dead end. He was untouchable because he hadn't broken any laws. He didn't need to. He just exposed the ones who did. They tried to paint him as a vigilante. Mendoza countered immediately. The real vigilantes wore badges and carried clipboards. Colonel Bishop didn't bring a war to this town. He ended one. Finally, it was Logan's turn. He wasn't called as a witness. But he stood at the back of the courtroom as sentencing day arrived. One by one, Judge Givens delivered the verdicts. Daniel Carter guilty on all counts. Miles Harden guilty. Brent Wycliffe guilty. Marcus Delacroix guilty. Sentences followed, 30 years. 40 years. Life. No parole. The entire front row of power had fallen. As the defendants were let out, Carter paused. He turned to Walter Bishop and said, barely above a whisper, I'm sorry. Walter looked at him, not with pity, not with rage, but with something deeper. Then prove it. Help clean up what you broke. Outside, the town gathered as the courtroom doors opened. People clapped not for celebration, but for release. A weight had been lifted. Justice had been served. Cameras flashed as Tanya Rhodes addressed the crowd. Brookhaven is no longer silent. And no longer afraid. That night, Walter and Logan sat in the office of the newly reopened shop. The lights were back on. The walls repainted. Windows repaired. The community had come together, volunteers pitching in, local businesses donating supplies. The Bishop Auto Repair sign had been replaced too, but this time, it bore a small emblem in the corner, an eagle with folded wings and a single word beneath it: resilient. Walter sipped coffee, watching his son scan reports from federal agencies now opening investigations in other towns. "You're leaving again," he said quietly. Logan didn't look up. "There's another place. Same sickness. Different names." Walter nodded. "You do what you have to. But don't forget this was just the beginning." Logan smiled faintly. "I won't. And I'll be back." As the night settled over Brookhaven, the streets were quieter. Calmer. No more intimidation. No more shadows. Just a town that remembered how to stand. And somewhere out there, another town was waiting. Another battle. Another reckoning. Because when justice wakes up, it doesn't sleep again. 3 months had passed since the trial that shook Brookhaven to its core. The courthouse steps were now just steps. The news vans had left. The cameras gone. But something had shifted, something permanent. People walked straighter. Stores stayed open later. And for the first time in decades, no one slipped an envelope of cash under a counter to stay safe. Walter Bishop had returned to his routine at the shop, though locals now treated him like a legend. They didn't just bring in their cars, they brought food, stories, gratitude, and respect. Kids who had once feared cops now came by after school just to hear him speak. "Courage isn't loud," he'd tell them. "It's just stubborn." But Logan wasn't at the shop anymore. He had moved into a small, windowless space above the town's VFW, where walls were now covered in maps, names, and dossiers. The ghost had gone back underground not to hide, but to operate freely. What happened in Brookhaven wasn't a fluke. It was the first spark in a field of dry grass. One corrupt town exposed. Dozens more left untouched. And Logan had no intention of stopping there. He'd begun building something, a digital task force without government red tape. A network of veterans, analysts, whistleblowers, and ex-law enforcement who were tired of watching good people lose. He called it Project Redeemer. No uniforms. No fanfare. Just results. They tracked patterns, small towns with similar complaints. Officers moving from one scandal to another with no record. Contractors overbilling municipalities. Local judges suppressing evidence. Logan had seen these signs before. It was systemic. But it could be dismantled one case at a time. He wasn't alone either. Officer Mason had resigned from the Brookhaven PD the day after the final sentencing. He showed up at Logan's door the next morning. "I want in," he said. "Not just Brookhaven. I want to help fix the next one." Tanya Rhodes also stayed in touch, providing media cover and investigative muscle. Her Chronicle reports were now being syndicated. People from towns she'd never heard of were sending her encrypted emails, documents, and silent cries for help. One letter stuck with her: "We saw what you did in Brookhaven. We need a ghost here, too." But not everyone was grateful. Across the state line, in a wealthy suburb called Edgewater, a sheriff named Hugh Roden was watching Logan's rise with growing anxiety. He had skeletons buried deeper than most, and he knew what would happen if the wrong person started pulling on threads. "We've got a problem," he muttered to a friend on the city council. Brookhaven was the warning. "We're next." Roden didn't know it yet, but one of his deputies had already contacted Logan's team anonymously. Photos. Sealed files. Evidence of cover-up stretching back 10 years. Logan hadn't acted yet, but he'd marked the town on his map. One red pin. Labeled, Edgewater, pending. Late one evening, as Walter locked up the shop, he found Logan sitting out front in a folding chair, staring at the stars. They sat in silence for a while before Walter spoke. "You ever going to rest?" Logan shrugged. "Maybe. But not yet." Walter chuckled. "Your mother would have called this tilting at windmills." Logan smiled faintly. She also said it only takes one hand to strike the match. Walter leaned forward. You didn't just save this town, Logan. You reminded people they're not powerless. You think that ends when you leave? Logan looked at him. It doesn't end. That's the point. It starts again. His phone buzzed. Another encrypted message. Another red flag. Another fire to walk into. He stood slowly. I've got a meeting in Atlanta. Former prosecutor turned whistleblower. Says he's got tapes. Walter nodded. You know you're fighting something bigger than corruption, right? Logan met his father's gaze. Yeah. I'm fighting the memory that silence was ever normal. The next morning, Logan slipped out of town quietly. No goodbyes. No send-off. Just a man with a bag, a laptop, and a purpose. He boarded a train heading east, vanishing like vapor in the early light. Behind him, Brookhaven stood cleaner, stronger, freer. Ahead of him, more darkness. More battles. But Logan didn't fear it. Because he had already beaten it once. And now? He was just getting started. When silence becomes the norm, injustice becomes tradition. This story reminds us that real change doesn't begin in courtrooms or headlines, it begins when one person decides to stand up. Walter Bishop didn't have power. He had principle. And his son, Logan, didn't need an army. He had truth, strategy, and the will to fight. What happened in Brookhaven is happening in more places than we think. Systems of fear, cover-ups, and corruption don't collapse on their own, they're dismantled by people who refuse to look away. Here's the truth: if you stay silent, the system wins. But when we speak out, share stories like this, and support those who take risks to expose the truth, we shift the balance. So don't just scroll past. If this story moved you, leave a comment with the word justice. Every comment pushes this message further. Every like raises its voice. And every subscription joins a growing movement of people who believe in truth over fear. Hit that subscribe button. Share this story. Let the world know the ghost isn't just one man. It's a mindset. And it's spreading. Justice doesn't sleep anymore. Neither should we.